Assalamualaikum, my name is Muhammad Hamizan bin Zamri. My matrix number is 2020-990-751. So today I would like to talk about demography. In demography, we have population in USA. The population in USA reached almost 300 millions in 2020. And USA population has increased since 1950, has made the third highest population rate in the world. Since 1955, the birth rate within the US has decreased from 2010 to 2020, and there was a significant decrease from 1960 to 1980. The typical for every of youngster per woman is required for every generation to exchange it correctly without the necessity for international immigration. So we go to the United States urban population. United States urban population areas are 80.7% of the US population live in cities. 253.8% that share of the Puerto Rico that sleep in the populated area. 392.6% of the population of the island live in the cities. Due to differing nation coverage, the entire urban and rural areas might not sum to the entire population. It supported population estimates from the Planet Bank and concrete ratios from United Nations World Urbanization Prospects. Infant mortality rates and death of children. Mortality among children aged around 5 to 14 years old. In 2070, the death rate among children aged 5 to 14 years was 7.2 deaths per 1,000 children age death rate. Overall, the number of youngsters under age 5 who died has decreased from 12.6 million, which is 15,000 children under the age of 5, compared to 34,000 in 1990. The general under 5 death rate has decreased by 59% since 1990, down from 93 deaths per thousand live birth in 1990 to 39 in 2018. So we talk about population density in USA. The population density within the US is 29% per mile. The population density within different states range from 1.28 per 1.28 people per mile. Through the year 2010, forecasts from the United Nations also include in also include in 2019 the population density within the US was 33.47% per square kilometer, up to 0.6% from 2018. In 2018, the population density within the US was 33.27 people per square kilometer, up to 0.62% from 2017. So the last one is life expectancy in the USA. In 2020, the typical anticipation within the US was 78.53 years, up to 0.08% from 2019. For 2019, the typical anticipation within the US was 78.57 years, up to 0.08% from 2018. In 2018, the typical anticipation within the US was 78.81 years, down to 0.03% from 2017. Supported the year of the birth, current age, and other demographic factors like biological sex, anticipation may be statistical estimate of the typical duration a private is predicted to measure. Anticipation at birth is that the most frequently used metric is often defined in two ways.
What is inflation? It's possible that it's one of the most well-known terms in economics. Inflation has thrown countries into a state of long-term instability. Most central bankers want to be inflation hawks. Politicians won elections on the promise of combating inflation, only to lose power when they fail. Inflation has been declared. President Gerald Ford was named the United States' No. 1 public enemy in 1974. Inflation is defined as the general outward movement of commodities and services in an economy. Inflation is described as a general reduction in the value of money as prices rise, each dollar becomes less valuable. A single dollar could buy 4 postal stamps in 1988. Today it can only buy less than 2. The government's most common method for measuring inflation is the Consumer Price Index, or known as CPI. To calculate the CPI, the government creates a fictitious basket of items and services that a typical consumer may buy or rent, such as food, transportation, and other necessities. The CPI is the total cost of all these goods. The government keeps track inflation by measuring and publishing the change in the Consumer Price Index from month to month and year to year. There are types of inflation. The first one is open inflation, a scenario in which the cost of consumers' products continues to rise. Instead of a loss in the value of money, open inflation could indicate a true increase in the worth of consumer goods. An example of open inflation is when a food and gas price rise while home, automotive, and art prices remain stable or fall. Second is suppressed inflation. If state officials take administrative steps of restrict or even prevent price rises, rare commodities, the shadow economy, and other factors all contribute to this situation. In such cases, the government imposes price control and on commodities to regulate the supply of critical requirements such as agricultural products. Last is hidden inflation. The government establishes strict rules that require firms to price their goods correctly in order to keep costs under control. Product quality suffers as a result of the manufacturer's inability to sell the commodity at higher prices in order to earn the profit. This indicates that firms are selling lower quality items at greater price, causing inflation. Cause of inflation, the first one is demand full inflation. This is when the aggregate demand in the economy exceeds the aggregate supply. This increase in the aggregate demand might occur due to an increase in the money supply or income or the level of public expenditure. This concept is associated with full employment when altering the supply is not possible. Possible causes of demand full inflation are excessive investment, expenditures, excessive growth of consumption expenditure, low-cost loan, tax cutting, and augmentation of government expenditure. Next is cost-push inflation. Inflation pressure can also be caused by supply. If aggregate demand remains constant but aggregate supply reduces owing to exogenous factors, the price level rises. As a result, inflation is a self-limiting process. Imperfect competition, higher taxes, rising wage, and political occurrences are all potential sources of cost-push inflation, like oil crisis. Last is built-in inflation. Finally, future inflation expectation cause built-in inflation, that is, as prices rise, employees anticipate and demand higher pay to maintain their standard of life. However, rising wages result in greater manufacturing costs, which lead to higher prices, and the downward spiral begins. Because of the cyclical dependence, built-in inflation is also known as the wage price spiral. It is important to emphasize at this point that the expectation that produce built-in inflation are always the result of either continuous demand pull or several cost-push inflation in the past. The effects of inflation, cost of living. Inflation's most visible consequence is an increase in the cost of living. You will spend more each year for your total expenditure such as housing, food, fuel, healthcare, and so on, as prices rise. In most situations, however, inflation doesn't have the same effect on oil price. For example, in July 2020, it was reported that the price of energy, particularly gasoline, had increased significantly in June. Other goods that witnessed substantial price rise were transportation, clothes, and food. Price for most other items, on the other hand, had scarcely changed, if at all, and had even decreased in certain circumstances. Next is salary. One of the benefits of inflation for employees is that it tends to raise salaries. This is because as individuals buy more, prices are more likely to rise. This increased demand encourages firms to produce more, which necessitates the hiring of more people. When the economy is booming, however, people have a lot of job options, so firms must pay more to compete. Prices tend to rise even faster as earnings rise because consumers are willing to pay higher price because they have more money in their pockets. Firms increase their pricing to compensate for rising labor expense. This bonus, on the other hand, doesn't benefit all employees equally. Workers in industries with the highest level of competition benefit the most. They are in the best position to demand a higher than inflation rate increase, therefore, they are speaking up. Lastly is employment. Inflation tends to raise wage since it reduces unemployment. As previously stated, inflation is associated with strong consumer demand, and high demand encourages business to recruit more other people in order to produce more. Overall, it's a good sign for the economy. Individuals who are employed and earning money spend more than people who are jobless, which helps the economy grow. Strong inflation, on the other hand, doesn't ensure strong growth. The United States had stagflation in the 1970s, which was a combination of inflation and economic stagnation or slow development. According to Investopedia, the CPI was increasing at a rate of 6% to 12% per year, despite the fact that the unemployment rate was far higher than 5%. How to stop the inflation? The first step is Treasury inflation securities. Inflation in Treasuries protected securities are special bonds that are constantly changed to match inflation, while you will not get a significant return. The US government supports your money, protecting your purchasing power. I-bonds are another inflation-protected treasury investment that can help you beat inflation. However, it is vital to understand that the default possibility remains like all bonds. Next is index funds. Past performance shows the stock market doesn't lose money for a long time. However, is it all first and you are still in danger? Keep in mind that markets change, so here we are talking about long-term investments, not cash in a few months or years. Individual stock picking, however, doesn't have the same success potential. With index fund and ETPs, you can take advantage of strength of the entire stock market. Fees are modest and you should have outpaced inflation if you wait long enough. Last step is commodities. If you can handle the volatility and risk involved in commodities investment, you may be able to keep ahead of inflation. People will always seek commodities, and commodities are prone to inflation. Investing in them may help you obtain long-term competitive advantage. Commodity ETPs can help decrease your risk.
What is unemployment? When an individual who is currently pursuing for a job has been unable to obtain work, they are said to be unemployed. Unemployment has long been considered as a barometer of the state of the economy. The unemployment rate that is calculated by dividing the total number of unemployed workers by the overall number of total labor force is the most widely used unemployment statistic. Unemployment is a key economic indicator since it reflects employees' capacity or incapacity to obtain contribute to their economic activity. Total economic output will be smaller than it would otherwise be if there are more unemployed workers. Unemployed workers, unlike other assets, are required to consume at least minimally during their period of unemployment. Indicate that low-wage economy generates fewer goods and services without a corresponding drop in demand for vital goods and services. Unemployment that is high for a lengthy period may signify serious economic and difficulties and in turn may result in political problems. The unemployment of United States, US. The economy of the United States had a rather good year. The US economy is expected to grow at a rate of 2.4% in 2019, which is impressive by global standard but lower than the 2.9% report in 2018. The tax cuts short-term economic stimulus is likely to have worn off, resulting in slowdown in GDP growth. The 5.9% pay increase between 2015 and 2019 is another element in the labor market's performance in the United States. Furthermore, pay growth has been uneven with various principles applied to different groups, notably among graduates. Indeed, black graduates saw their wages decline by 0.3%, while white graduates has seen their wages increase by 6.6% since 2015. All other factors being equal, the sluggish and unequal pay growth violates employment supply and demand theories and indicate that wages will go up as unemployment decrease and job demand increase. Other factors might be at play, such as unemployed lower wage pricing, polarized shift in employment arrangement, and discrimination. Since the Great Recession, which was caused by the financial crisis of 2007-2008, unemployment rates in the United States have steadily decreased. During 2008-2007, both countries, particularly the United States, saw their unemployment rates rise. It took them nearly a full decade to get back to pre-crisis standards. It is shown in figure given. Nonetheless, since 2004, the concentration of occupation in metropolitan regions has risen in the United States. However, the four major metropolitan areas, namely New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Seattle, have been a growth in their population. They demonstrate how, over time, the regional distribution of employment and growth opportunities has gotten more unequal. Cities that are lagging will have a difficult time attracting innovative firms and talented workers. Even though regional job markets in the United States have many characteristics, they may be quite different. Then, unemployment income share. The unemployment income share has suggested that in the United States, the income premium for self-employed people over workers has been dropping. They correspond to a gradual decline in the self-employment employees' income relative to that of employees.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Shuzaidana bintu Shardi. My metric number is 20209960993. I want to present about policy and employment of current state. Firstly, monetary policy. Expansive monetary policy stifles the contractionary pace of the business yield cycle. Policymakers, on the other hand, will have a difficult time catching this in time. As a result, when a recession has started, expansionary policy is commonly adopted. What is monetary policy and how does it work? Firstly, operation in the open market. The federal most equivalent tool is open market operations. It is presently purchasing treasury bills from its member banks. Where does it get the money it needs? The Federal Reserve essentially creates credit out of thin air. This is what people mean when they claim the Federal is creating money. By replacing treasury notes with credit, the Federal gives banks more money to lend. To lend out the excess cash, banks cut lending rates. This brings down the cost of cars, school, and home loans. They also decrease credit card interest rate. All of this increased financing boosts customer spending. When company loans are less expensive, companies may grow to fulfill client demand. They hire more workers, resulting in higher pay, allowing them to spend even more money. This is typically sufficient to increase demand and accelerate economic growth to a healthy 2% to 3% rate. Second is type the Federal Reserve funds rate. The Federal Reserve Open Market commit by decide to lower the federal funds rate. It's the interest rate that banks charge each other on overnight deposit. Every night, the Federal Reserve requires that a certain percentage of a bank's deposit be held in reserve at their local Federal Reserve branch office. At the federal reference rate, banks who have more money than they need will lend it to banks that don't have enough. If the Federal Reserve reduces its target rates, banks will be able to hold their reserve for less money, allowing them to lend more money. As a result, banks may be able to offer lower interest rates to their customers. Third is rate of discount. The fourth tool at the federal disposal is a decrease in the reserve requirement. While this immediately increases liquidity, it also demands a plethora of additional rules and processes for member institutions. Lowering the federal fund rate is considerably more straightforward and effective. The Federal adds a host of new monetary policy weapons to its armory during the financial crisis. The second policy on employment of current state is fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy refers to the use of budgetary producer by the government to increase spending or reduce taxes in order to increase the money supply in the economy, giving customers and business more money to spend. The president has a say in the process in the United States, but the law must be prepared and enacted by Congress. In Congress, there are two types of spending. The first is through passing discretionary spending legislation on a yearly basis. What is the process of fiscal expansions? Subsidies, transfer payment including welfare programs, and tax cuts are all used by expansionary fiscal policy to put more money in the other hands of customers, giving them more spending power. It also reduces unemployment by contracting public works or hiring more government workers. Both are will stimulate demand and increase customer spending, which contributes for more than 70% of GDP. The other three components of gross domestic product are government spending, net export, and business investment. Methods for regulating inflation in the United States. Inflation is monitored by the central banks and the government. Monetary policy is the most prevalent type of policy. In principle, however, there are a number of techniques that may be used to limit inflation. Firstly, macroeconomic policy. Macroeconomic policy is a lower inflation and slower growth are the result of higher interest rates, which reduce economic demand. Second is money supply control. Monetarists argue that because the money supply and inflation are so closely connected, controlling inflation requires limiting the money supply. Third is policies on the supply side. Strategy for increasing the economic competitiveness and efficiency while reducing long-term costs. Fourth is monetary policy. A higher unit tax rate on income would reduce customer spending, demand, and inflationary pressure. Fifth is wage management. In theory, seeking to limit salaries might help to reduce inflationary pressure. There are few good policies in United States. Firstly, agriculture policy. The agriculture policy of the United States is the country governing policy for agriculture. and it is mostly comprised of federal farm bills, which are reprinted on a regular basis. In the second half of the 19th century, the U.S. federal government began planning and implementing agriculture development projects. Between 1850 and the early 19th, important organizations aimed at lowering taxation costs in the private sector began to emerge. Second is drug law and regulation. The United States drug policy is overseen by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, a former cabinet level 20 component of the Executive Office of the President of the United States. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1918 established it. Its declared mission is to establish policies, goals, and objectives in the United States to eliminate illicit drug use, manufacturing, and trafficking, as well as drug-related crime and violence and health impacts. Second is policy on energy. Energy policy in the United States address issues such as building code and gas mileage requirement, as well as energy production, delivery, and consumption. The United States Department of Energy, whose mission is to ensure America's security and prosperity by resolving its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenge, very creative scientific and technological solution plays a key role. Lastly is foreign policy. The foreign policy of the United States dictates how the country interacts with other nations. It solely cares about the protection of the American people and the maintenance of international order. The following are the most important foreign policies of the United States. Firstly, refocusing on a dangerous Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan, ending the Iraq conflict in a responsible manner, preventing terrorists from obtaining nuclear weapons, promoting Israel's and the Middle East interests and security, re-energizing America's international partnerships, upholding fundamental American principles, replacing America's dominance in Latin America, and lastly, ensuring energy security and combating global warming.